Sam Bankman-Fried and the FTX collapse just made things more difficult for the TBC, but also the work that we do is far more important now. The policy landscape is more challenging, but all the more reason for us to press in, roll up our sleeves, and get the work done. Now let me back up and say what happened in all this. SBF was ostensibly a good actor in the space.
We'd raised a few $1 billion over the course of the last couple of years, and we're a profitable business.
Making political donations, helping to craft policy. But what we didn't see is behind the scenes, he was using the funds, customer funds, to shore up holes in a balance sheet of Alameda, which was a hedge fund that he had started years earlier. So what we need to learn from this is a couple things, right? First of all, centralized exchanges have their risks. They serve a purpose, but they have significant risks. So increased transparency is important. As consumers, we need to be sure that we are self-custodying any digital asset. So if we're making a purchase, if we're buying Bitcoin on an exchange, that Bitcoin, as soon as it's available to be moved to either a cold storage wallet or a hot wallet on your phone, needs to take place as soon as you can. If you don't know how to do that, we're happy to help you walk through it. We have members of the team that could set up a Zoom call with you to work through that process with you. Also, we need increased transparency. We need these exchanges to be willing to submit to a little bit more rigorous transparency, whether that's with their auditors or with the general public. We need auditors to have real-time dynamic proof of reserves and liabilities. This snapshot of proof of reserves at one single point in time is not sufficient. So we're going to self-police and help draft legislation that will make that more likely. We're not going to wait on regulators in DC to do it because they will craft legislation that's overly onerous and not effective. We think using blockchain technology and using the transparency of these decentralized distributed ledgers, that this kind of transparency is possible without a crazy 100-page piece of legislation. In Texas, we're going to do it in a much more succinct fashion. Another thing for consumers to be aware of is when you're interacting with an exchange, look at the terms and conditions. Make sure that they are not commingling or rehypothecating your investments. It really is a moot point as if you move your funds off the exchange as soon as possible, but even still, read the fine print. Sam Bankman-Fried at FTX actually said that they were not doing that, so that's clear fraud. They've broken their agreement with their customers. There's other instances of fraud as well, but one thing that I will say is other exchanges that have gone bankrupt in a similar fashion, like Celsius or Voyager, they actually let consumers know that their funds were going to be rehypothecated. Was it a good idea? Is it a good business practice? No. I think that business practice is going by the wayside. But at least they were informing customers that they were doing that. SBF and FTX were actually saying one thing and doing another, and in a spectacular fashion, right? Massive amounts of money, billions of dollars, were being funneled in to plug holes in Alameda due to some poor risk management in Alameda and some investments that went awry and were illiquid. And if an exchange has an exchange token, be wary of that, for example, right? It's not Bitcoin, it's not Ethereum, it's an exchange token. It's certainly not as decentralized and not as secure. This is not investment advice by any means, but certainly do your research. An exchange token is not one that serious investors are going to look to buy and hold for long periods of time. The TBC is a nonprofit industry association, which means we're well placed to research and help craft policy in a non-conflicted way. The CEOs of centralized exchanges, they have conflicts of interest, so they're not the best advocates for our industry in the halls of power. What we need to be sure to do is to create best practices and create policy that gives transparency to consumers and actually provides some consumer protection. And we're going to do that first here in Texas, and then other states will certainly follow. I don't anticipate that Washington, D.C. will get anything passed. They are gridlocked on this issue. So this is falling to the states, and Texas will certainly lead on creating best practices for dynamic proof of reserves and proof of liabilities, and ensuring that exchanges do not commingle customer funds. So look for more details about legislation that we're working on coming out in the coming weeks. There's been a couple of hangovers from this debacle with FTX. First of all, you have a lot of consumers that were hurt by this, and many of those are in Texas, right? FTX US has been operating in Texas and certainly has a lot of customers here, so that's a concern. We're also concerned about the regulatory fallout. We have a great relationship with the Texas State Securities Board in Texas and certainly support them going after fraudulent actors in the space. However, with the regulatory environment as a whole, this incident has created a significant amount of distrust and concern among regulators. So it's all the more important for an industry association like the TBC to craft best practices that make regulators comfortable moving forward. In short, what happened with SBF and FTX is a tragedy. There will be investigations to uncover criminal wrongdoing or negligence, but the important thing to remember is that the blockchain, Bitcoin, and digital asset industry is in its very beginnings and will only go up from here. In Texas, expect to see a light touch regulatory environment that allows exchanges to operate. We expect to see continued self-custody from consumers in Texas and institutional investors. And we do think that Texas will continue to be the center of the universe for the Bitcoin blockchain and digital asset ecosystem. So if you want to be a part of what we're doing here in Texas, join the TBC.